My 25F, has given up on her career after I became a millionaire. How do I tell her this won't work out? 25 have been with my girlfriend, Kylie, for around 5 years now. We met in community college when we were both just figuring out life, and she's been there for me through every step of my journey, including the years of uncertainty, hard work, and grind to get to where I am now. We started dating 2 years after meeting, and back then, she was set on becoming a nurse. She talked about her dreams, the satisfaction of helping people, and the stability that career would bring. It was one of the things I loved about her ambition and drive. When I transferred to a 4-year university to get my MBA, Kylie was my emotional rock. She'd take the time to listen to my concerns, even help me with meal prep and budgeting, and provided the support I needed to get through it. She's always been amazing in that regard, and I'm genuinely grateful for everything she's done for me. She's a caring, kind-hearted person who truly goes out of her way to make others feel supported. On her end, things got challenging with her family. Kylie's parents have never been great with money, and they've had issues with her spending habits. A couple of years ago, they decided to cut her off financially, which led her to take a year off to work at a jewelry store. She had planned to return to college, but life just kept throwing curveballs. She stuck with her job, put off school, and always said she'd go back when things stabilized. During this time, I'd invested all my savings, time, and energy into a startup in the automotive industry with my best friend. We were working crazy hours, burning the candle at both ends, and for a while, I wasn't sure if it would pay off. Then, earlier this year, we got bought out for an amount that changed my life completely. I became a millionaire practically overnight. The company kept us on as consultants, so I still have a high-paying job, but now with more financial security than I ever thought possible at my age. When I told Kylie about the buyout, she was ecstatic. A few weeks later, she mentioned putting in her 2 weeks at the jewelry store. I wasn't surprised, since I assumed she would focus on going back to school full-time. I even offered to cover her tuition and living expenses so she could pursue her nursing degree without worrying about work. At first, she was thrilled by the idea. She talked about finally getting her nursing degree, fulfilling her dreams, and even getting a fresh start in a new condo I bought close to her school. But recently, her attitude towards school and her career goals has completely shifted, and it's starting to raise concerns for me. Over the weekend, we were having a casual conversation, and she mentioned, almost offhandedly, that she wasn't so sure about going back to school. She then hinted that she could just become a stay-at-home wife, taking on the household responsibilities while I focused on work. We're not even married, and while I have nothing against the idea of someone wanting to stay home if that's what they're passionate about, it didn't feel like this was coming from a place of genuine interest in that lifestyle. Instead, it felt like she was seeing my financial success as her opportunity to leave behind her career ambitions. In that moment, I didn't really know what to say. I just sat there, feeling completely taken aback. Part of what initially attracted me to Kylie was her ambition, her drive, her passion for nursing. Now it feels like she's dropped all of that because there's money in the picture. I'm also noticing other small changes that are adding to my concerns. Her shopping and spending habits have increased. She's been looking at high-end items and considering buying a new car. It's not that I'm against her enjoying herself, especially after all the hard work and sacrifices we've both made, but it's the sudden shift in priorities that's troubling me. I've always dreamed of being with someone who is equally driven, who has their own goals and ambitions, someone who wants to build a life with me as a partner. Now, it feels like we're drifting in different directions. It feels like she's expecting me to be the financial provider, and she'll handle things at home. But we're still young, and I'm not sure I'm ready for that dynamic, especially when it feels like she's giving up on her dreams. I don't want to hurt her or make her feel unappreciated, especially after everything she's done for me. I still love her deeply, but this new side of her feels so different from the person I fell in love with. Part of me wonders if I'm overreacting, maybe being too hard on her given the new circumstances. But another part of me feels uneasy. like she's abandoning who she wanted to be just because I came into money. I want to have an honest conversation with her, but I'm not even sure how to bring it up without coming across as controlling or ungrateful. I know she's been there for me through tough times, and I don't want her to feel like I'm judging her. But at the same time, I want her to know that I fell in love with her for her ambition and her dreams. How do I bring this up and let her know that this sudden shift isn't something I'm comfortable with? Is there a way to ask her if she truly wants this, or if it's just a reaction to my financial success? I want us to work through this, but I need to understand where she stands. But recently, her attitude towards school and her career goals has completely shifted, and it's starting to raise concerns for me. Over the weekend, we were having a casual conversation, and she mentioned, almost offhandedly, that she wasn't so sure about going back to school. She then hinted that she could just become a stay-at-home wife, taking on the household responsibilities while I focused on work. We're not even married, and while I have nothing against the idea of someone wanting to stay home if that's what they're passionate about, it didn't feel like this was coming from a place of genuine interest in that lifestyle. Instead, it felt like she was seeing my financial success as her opportunity to leave behind her career ambitions. In that moment, I didn't really know what to say. I just sat there, feeling completely taken aback. Part of what initially attracted me to Kylie was her ambition, her drive, her passion for nursing. Now, it feels like she's dropped all of that because there's money in the picture. I'm also noticing other small changes that are adding to my concerns. Her shopping and spending habits have increased. She's been looking at high-end items and considering buying a new car. It's not that I'm against her enjoying herself, especially after all the hard work and sacrifices we've both made, but it's the sudden shift in priorities that's troubling me. I've always dreamed of being with someone who is equally driven, who has their own goals and ambitions, someone who wants to build a life with me as a partner. Now, it feels like we're drifting in different directions. It feels like she's expecting me to be the financial provider, and she'll handle things at home. But we're still young, and I'm not sure I'm ready for that dynamic, especially when it feels like she's giving up on her dreams. I don't want to hurt her or make her feel unappreciated, especially after everything she's done for me. I still love her deeply, but this new side of her feels so different from the person I fell in love with. Part of me wonders if I'm overreacting, maybe being too hard on her given the new circumstances. But another part of me feels uneasy, like she's abandoning who she wanted to be just because I came into money. I want to have an honest conversation with her, but I'm not even sure how to bring it up without coming across as controlling or ungrateful. I know she's been there for me through tough times, and I don't want her to feel like I'm judging her. But at the same time, I want her to know that I fell in love with her for her ambition and her dreams. How do I bring this up and let her know that this sudden shift isn't something I'm comfortable with? Is there a way to ask her if she truly wants this, or if it's just a reaction to my financial success? I want us to work through this, but I need to understand where she stands. After everyone left, he told me he was really hurt by what I'd done. He said he felt humiliated, and he pointed out that I knew how much he disliked public displays of affection, especially in front of family. I felt terrible, especially because it was his birthday, a day that was supposed to be all about him. I explained to him that my intention wasn't to embarrass him, but to clear up the ridiculous rumors my sister had started. I thought a quick show of affection would be the simplest way to do that. The problem is, he sees things differently. He feels that I chose my family's perceptions over his feelings and that I disregarded the boundaries he had clearly set. Now, I'm feeling torn. On one hand, I do feel like I embarrassed him on his birthday, and that was never my intention. I know he values his privacy and prefers to keep our intimate moments just between us. But on the other hand, I was genuinely worried that the rumors my sister started were affecting how my family saw him, and I felt a responsibility to protect our relationship from those false narratives. I hate that I made him uncomfortable, and I feel terrible for putting him on the spot. But I also wonder if I did the right thing by addressing the situation head-on even if it was a bit out of character for us as a couple. Part of me feels justified for wanting to set the record straight, but another part of me feels guilty for not respecting his boundaries. So, Ida for kissing my husband in front of my family to prove a point, even though I knew he'd be uncomfortable? I'd love some outside perspective on this because I'm really struggling with how to handle this balance between my family and my husband's comfort. My 32 wife, 31F, sold the dresser my Sael, 28-ish, built and gifted us. How do I help smooth and fix the potential backlash? So my Sael, my brother's wife, makes furniture as a hobby and is really good at it. About a year ago, my brother randomly asked if my wife and I needed anything. He was beating around the bush, and I blurted the first thing that came to mind and said a new entryway dresser would be nice. I didn't think anything would come out of it, but a couple of months ago, for our 5th anniversary, they surprised us with our own custom-built dresser. I'm not a crafty person at all, but I could tell that a lot of effort and time was put into this piece. She combined 2 types of wood, joints and edges were flushed and smooth. There was a lot of thought put into the design, little additional details and whatnot. Nice oil finish and soft closing drawers. All of this to say that the piece was extremely well made with good craftsmanship, and my wife and I absolutely loved it. We often joked on how it's probably the most expensive furniture we have and will ever own, since we mostly have second-hand furniture, and we can only afford to buy on the low end. Anyways, last weekend I was away for work, and my wife sold the dresser online without my knowledge. When I got home, I didn't notice at first, but then saw she bought a bunch of new clothes. I asked her where she got the extra money from, and she casually says she sold the dresser. I thought she was kidding. I went and checked, and the old dresser we put in the basement is back at its original place. I ask her to elaborate, and she says that as a joke, and out of curiosity, she put it online for $500, but someone offered $1,800 in cash, and they would come pick it up immediately. She accepted. When everything sank in, I told her she shouldn't have done that she's an asshole since it's also my dresser and she didn't even get my permission. She brushed me off and said I was overreacting. She even said we can just buy another dresser with the leftover money, but that would not happen since we already have our old one back. She even had the gall to say we could just ask Sil to make another dresser since she's only practicing her skills anyways. I swear my wife isn't usually like this and that she's being blinded by the stupid money. It's been tense for the past few days and we've barely talked. At first I tried to find a way to get the dresser back and maybe somehow negotiate, but when I asked my wife for the person's details, she said it's already been deleted and that the online profile has also been removed. She's been insulting the dresser when she never did before, saying things like it's not even well made, that it's ugly, heavy, and that it's useless anyways. Whenever I try to talk some sense into her, that not everything is about the money, and that I don't want our relationship with my brother and Sile to turn sour because of her actions, she simply says we can hide it and they wouldn't even know. I don't know what's up with my wife, and I don't stand by what she did. I think it's unlikely for us to get the dresser back. We don't even have extra money to pay for it since she already spent almost half of it. I've been putting off telling my brother what happened. I don't know how to approach the situation, but I can't cover for my wife in good conscience. I don't want my Sile to be hurt, but my wife won't budge in any direction. Do I confess to my brother first, then let him tell her? Or do I tell her on my own? TLDR, Seal gave my wife and I a quality custom-built entryway dresser for our anniversary this year. Wife sold the dresser online without my knowledge and no other good reason than monetary gain. I don't want to sour our ties with my brother and Sael, although I understand some sort of damage is inevitable. How do I come clean about the situation, confess without hurting anyone, and doing the least damage possible? Ida, for excluding my brother from my wedding because of his fun facts. Growing up, my older brother David, 41, was always different from the rest of us. He was in the learning disabled classes at school, struggled with social skills, and never got the opportunity to experience much outside of our family home. My parents have always kept David close never letting him venture too far. This sheltered upbringing, combined with some unique personality traits, made David difficult to relate to for us, his siblings, and honestly, for anyone outside the family. David has this habit of going off on tangents about fun facts. They're not lighthearted conversation starters. They're full-blown lectures, ranging from random trivia to deep historical lessons. He doesn't notice when people aren't interested, or when they're outright uncomfortable with his facts. It's tough to interrupt him, and he tends to dominate family gatherings, making any social interaction challenging. As kids, we didn't really understand it, but as we grew older, it became clear that David's fun facts were more than just quirky. They were alienating. Family tension and growing frustrations. As my siblings and I matured, we grew frustrated with how much our family revolved around David. Holidays and special events always seemed to turn into a stage for his monologues, while our parents watched on, letting him go on, and even encouraging him with comments like, "Let the professor talk." He has no friends outside the family, and I think that makes our parents feel guilty, so they do everything they can to make him feel included. But, in doing so, they end up putting him in the center, even at our expense. The culmination of these issues came at my sister's wedding. She wanted a quiet, intimate ceremony with close friends and family, but my mom insisted on finding a place for David. Mom didn't just want him there, she wanted him actively involved. It's not that my sister wanted to exclude him, but she wanted a peaceful wedding day, free from his intrusive lectures. Things got especially bad during wedding dress shopping, where Mom brought David along. He proceeded to give everyone a history lesson on the origin of wedding dresses and the traditional colors, down to the minutiae. At that point, my sister felt that any sense of control over her own wedding was slipping away, and she eloped. She said it was easier to run away than fight for the wedding she wanted. My wedding with Mel and the fun facts incident. Now, it's my turn to get married to my fiancée Mel, and the situation with David has become impossible to ignore. We're planning a real wedding with family and friends. Mel's family is supportive and excited, and she has a close relationship with my other siblings. Mel wants a peaceful, beautiful day with her family and mine, without the constant disruption David brings. At one family gathering, when I showed Mom the ring I bought for Mel, David immediately launched into one of his fun facts about how diamonds are worthless and gave me a 10-minute rundown on the history of engagement rings, explaining that colored stones were more historically accurate. He even suggested I should have gotten Mel a second-hand ring because it would have better resale value. I could see Mel's face drop as he went on and on. I tried to shut him down politely, but Mom insisted, "Let the professor talk." Mel, holding her patience, nodded politely, but I knew it was the final straw for her. After that encounter, Mel told me flat out she didn't want David at our wedding. It wasn't a decision we came to lightly, but she doesn't want to feel like she's going to be constantly embarrassed or talked down to on her own wedding day. And frankly, I agreed with her. David's behavior, which I've put up with my entire life, doesn't have a place at what's supposed to be our special day. Mel wants her family to meet mine, and she wants them to feel comfortable, not awkward or ignored, because David is giving a 20-minute lecture on random trivia. We both knew that inviting David would mean sacrificing the kind of wedding we wanted. The talk with my parents. Once the decision was made, I knew I had to talk to my parents about it. I told my mom that I didn't want David at the wedding, and she didn't take it well. She's always been incredibly protective of him, probably because she feels he's had fewer opportunities than the rest of us. She tried to argue that his fun facts were just part of his personality and that it wasn't hurting anyone. But I disagreed. It was hurting us, especially during family gatherings where it felt like none of us had a voice. I told her that Mel and I wanted a day that was about us, not about David's unsolicited lectures. When Mom asked if she could be part of the wedding planning, I had to be blunt. After the incident with my sister, where Mom dragged David to dress shopping and let him dominate the conversation, I couldn't trust her to respect our wishes. She seemed hurt, but I reminded her that if she can't prioritize the bride and groom, then it wouldn't be fair to Mel or me to have her involved. This conversation didn't go well. My dad joined the call and tried to defend David, saying that the boy likes to talk and there's no harm in it. But I pointed out that it was more than just talking. David's fun facts took over every event, and my siblings and I were tired of feeling like secondary characters at our own family gatherings. I told my dad I felt like we were at an impasse, and that unfortunately, if they couldn't respect our boundaries, they wouldn't be able to come to the wedding either. The fallout those. Since that conversation, my mom has been sending long, emotional texts begging me to reconsider and to understand David. She's made me feel guilty, saying that family means making sacrifices and that I was being mean by excluding him. Part of me understands her pain, but another part is resolute that for once I want an event that won't revolve around him. I don't want Mel to feel like my sister did, forced to give up her own vision of her wedding day because my family insists on catering to David. My siblings support me, knowing firsthand how difficult family gatherings have been because of David. They all feel the same frustration I do, but were hesitant to speak up before. My sister, who was forced to elope, feels especially vindicated, telling me she wishes she had set similar boundaries. Am I the bad guy? Now I'm sitting here wondering if I'm going too far. My parents' pleas and texts have worn me down a bit. They say I'm tearing the family apart over something as trivial as fun facts. Mom and Dad think I'm being unkind to a brother who's never had it easy, who only wants to be part of my wedding. But I feel it's not about being mean. It's about drawing a line and saying, this is our day. My fiancée deserves a wedding where she's the focus, not an afterthought in her own celebration. There are moments when I second-guess myself, wondering if I should just relent, invite David, and try to manage him at the event. But then I remember how it felt when he criticized Mel's engagement ring, turning a happy moment into an awkward one. I remember how Mel looked, hurt and frustrated, and how Mom completely disregarded our feelings in favor of letting David have his say. So, Reddit, AIA for excluding my brother from my wedding because of his fun facts. Am I a bad brother for setting this boundary, or am I right to protect this one day from the family drama? I found my fiancé's secret, how a hidden life almost ruined us. I had always believed that love could conquer any obstacle. My fiancé and I were a perfect match, or so I thought. We had been together for 5 amazing years, sharing dreams, laughter, and a bond that felt unbreakable. Our relationship was built on trust, openness, and unwavering support for each other. We were in the final stages of planning our wedding, dreaming of a life together filled with love and adventure. Little did I know, that dream was about to be shattered. It all began on a Saturday afternoon, a day that started like any other. I had taken it upon myself to declutter our shared living space, tidying up and organizing things that had accumulated over the years. As I rummaged through her desk drawer, I stumbled upon an old phone, hidden beneath a stack of papers. At first, I thought it was just a relic from her past, perhaps an outdated model she had forgotten about. But my curiosity got the better of me. I turned it on, and as the screen lit up, I noticed it was surprisingly functional. As I scrolled through the phone, my heart raced. I couldn't shake the feeling that I shouldn't be doing this, but something compelled me to look closer. That's when I discovered a series of recent messages from a man I didn't recognize. At first, I told myself it was harmless, perhaps a friend reaching out. But the tone of their conversation felt too intimate. They shared jokes, flirted, and spoke of personal matters that made my stomach twist with unease. My heart sank as I realized that the messages were recent, not from a distant past. Stricken with anxiety, I didn't know what to do. Should I confront her immediately? Should I gather more evidence? My mind raced as I replayed moments from our relationship, trying to decipher if there had been any signs I had missed. When she finally came home, I felt a storm of emotions brewing inside me. I had to know the truth. "Hey, I found something I need to talk to you about," I started, my voice trembling as I gestured toward the phone. "What's the deal with this guy in your messages?" Her expression changed in an instant. She went pale, and I could see the panic rising in her eyes. For a moment, it felt like time stood still as silence enveloped us. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air, and I felt my heart racing louder than ever. Finally, she sighed, collapsing into a chair, her hands trembling. "I can explain," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, just let me tell you the whole story." As she began to unravel her confession, I could sense that this wasn't going to be easy to hear. She told me about a long-term relationship she had before we met, a man she had dated for years. Their relationship had ended, but not without significant emotional baggage. She admitted that when we first started dating, she hadn't fully moved on. "This guy, he was someone I dated for a long time," she confessed, tears welling in her eyes. "I thought I was over him, but when we started talking again, I didn't know how to stop. I never intended to hurt you." Her words were like daggers, piercing my heart. I felt anger rise within me, mixed with betrayal and confusion. "So you were still talking to him while we were dating?" I demanded, struggling to comprehend her actions. "No, it wasn't like that. I didn't tell him about us because I didn't want to hurt him. I wanted to end it, but I didn't know how." Her voice quivered with vulnerability. "When I met you, everything changed. I fell in love with you, and I wanted to build a life with you. I thought I could just leave it behind." In that moment, I felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under me. Our lives together had been filled with promises and plans for the future, but now I was left questioning everything. How could I trust her after this revelation? Every time she reached for me, I recoiled, haunted by images of her past. I wanted to forgive her, but the scars felt too deep, too raw. As days turned into weeks, my mind became a battleground. I felt like I was in a fog, trying to navigate my emotions while grappling with the weight of her confession. Each time we were together, I found myself analyzing every little detail of our relationship. Had I been blind to the signs? Was everything I thought I knew about her just a facade? She tried her best to reassure me, pouring her heart into explanations and apologies. She even offered to cut ties with the guy completely, but I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. The trust we had built felt fragile, like glass, ready to shatter with the slightest touch. I needed answers, but no amount of talking seemed to ease the turmoil inside me. Realizing we couldn't navigate this alone, we decided to seek couples therapy. It was a challenging process, but we both knew it was necessary. Our therapist helped us unpack our feelings, urging us to communicate openly about our fears, doubts, and expectations. It was uncomfortable and painful, but it was also a turning point. Through countless sessions, I began to express my feelings without fear of judgment. I learned to voice my insecurities while she worked on being more transparent about her past. We discussed boundaries, exploring what trust meant to each of us and how we could rebuild it. Slowly, the walls between us began to crumble, allowing space for understanding and healing. During those therapy sessions, I learned more about her than I ever had. I understood that her past didn't define who she was now. As she spoke about her struggles, her vulnerabilities, and her journey, I began to see her in a new light. It became clear that she had chosen me, and for that, I had to let go of the resentment that had taken root in my heart. Months later, we sat down to talk about our future again. The pain of her past no longer loomed over us. Instead, it had transformed into a shared experience that brought us closer. We discussed our wedding plans, but this time, it was different. We were building a foundation of trust and love that was stronger than before. While the road to rebuilding trust was long and filled with obstacles, it taught us invaluable lessons about love, honesty, and forgiveness. I realized that love is not just about the beautiful moments. It's about facing the difficult ones together. Our relationship had evolved into something more profound, more resilient. In the end, we emerged stronger, proving that even the deepest wounds can heal with time, understanding, and a willingness to grow together. We learned that love can be messy, complicated, and challenging, but it is also beautiful, rewarding, and worth fighting for. Our journey wasn't just about the challenges we faced. It was about the strength we found in each other, the love that grew even amid adversity. And as we stood together, hand in hand, ready to face the future, I knew we had built something truly special, a love forged in trust, resilience, and an unyielding commitment to one another. I want to share a story that has deeply impacted my family and me, one that revolves around a cherished tradition involving family heirlooms. Our family has two heirlooms, a set of cufflinks for the men and a stunning white jade bracelet for the women. This bracelet isn't just a piece of jewelry, it symbolizes acceptance into our family and is imbued with generations of love and history. When my oldest son got engaged, I felt a wave of joy as I prepared to pass the bracelet to his fiancée, my future daughter-in-law, Dielle. The moment I handed it over, I explained its significance. I told her how it had been worn by my grandmother, then my mother, and finally, I hoped, by her at their wedding. I wanted her to know that this was more than just a bracelet. It was a legacy that connected us all. I envisioned a beautiful moment at the wedding, her wearing the bracelet, surrounded by family and friends, celebrating love and togetherness. As the wedding date approached, I looked forward to the upcoming events, from bridal showers to family dinners, where we would all come together to celebrate the union. However, my excitement was soon overshadowed by an unexpected turn of events. My daughter, who had been developing a relationship with my future DL, came to me one day with disheartening news. She revealed that my future Dielle had been making disparaging remarks about the bracelet. According to my daughter, she called it ugly and expressed disdain for it in private conversations. My heart sank. Hearing such comments about something that held so much meaning to me felt like a stab to the heart. I had poured my love and hopes into this gesture, only to learn that she viewed it as something undesirable. It felt like a complete rejection, especially considering she knew the significance of the bracelet. I couldn't help but wonder how someone about to join our family could speak so dismissively about a symbol of our history. I decided to confront my son about it, hoping he could help shed light on the situation. To my surprise, he was completely unaware of her feelings toward the bracelet. He seemed shocked and confused, and his reaction left me feeling isolated. I had hoped that he would validate my concerns, but instead, I felt even more alone in my grief over this situation. I wanted him to understand that this wasn't just about the bracelet. It was about our family's values, traditions, and how we embrace new members. After much reflection, I felt compelled to take action. I decided to ask for the bracelet back. My rationale was simple. If she didn't appreciate its significance, then it wouldn't be right for her to wear it, especially at a family event as important as the wedding. When I approached her to ask for the bracelet back, I thought it was a reasonable request given her comments. However, that's when the situation escalated. Her reaction was explosive. She accused me of excluding her from the family and called me a controlling ass. I was taken aback. I had intended to express my feelings about the heirloom, but instead, I felt a wall being built between us. Her anger shocked me, and I couldn't understand why my request would provoke such a strong response. It felt like a rejection not only of the bracelet, but also of the love and tradition behind it. As the days went by, my son expressed disappointment in me for taking the bracelet back. He insisted that my actions made me look unwelcoming. I felt even more conflicted. Despite showing him the hurtful things she had said about me and the bracelet, he believed I had overstepped. I couldn't shake the feeling of being caught between wanting to uphold a family tradition and ensuring that my future Dielle felt welcomed. At this point, the situation had become incredibly tense. I often found myself crying, wrestling with guilt and regret. I had genuinely hoped that my gesture would bring us closer, and now I felt as if I had driven a wedge between us. I replayed the conversations over and over in my mind, wondering if I had misinterpreted her intentions or if I had indeed been too hasty in my decision to reclaim the bracelet. My heart ached for my son, who was stuck in the middle, trying to navigate a situation that was rapidly spiraling out of control. I started to doubt my instincts. Was I being too possessive? Should I have allowed her to wear the bracelet regardless of her opinions? I began to feel that my connection with my future Dielle was permanently damaged, and that realization was heartbreaking. All I wanted was for her to feel welcomed and loved, and yet it seemed like I had done the exact opposite. As the wedding date approached, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. I dreaded family gatherings where we would all be together, and the potential awkwardness that awaited us. I couldn't help but feel that our once joyful celebrations had turned into a battleground. I worried about how this conflict would impact my son and his fiancée as they began their new life together. In an attempt to mend the rift, I reached out to my future DL, expressing my feelings and apologizing if my actions had hurt her. I wanted her to understand that my intention had never been to exclude her, but rather to share a part of our family's legacy. I emphasized that I genuinely wanted her to be a part of our family and that I hoped we could find common ground. However, her response was lukewarm at best. She seemed unwilling to engage in an open dialogue, which left me feeling defeated. I realized that the path to reconciliation would not be easy, and I would have to find a way to navigate this new reality. I began to explore ways to help her feel more included without compromising our family traditions. Despite my efforts, I still felt a lingering sadness. I had hoped for a beautiful bond with my future DL, but instead, I felt a sense of loss. I longed for the days when we could celebrate family milestones without the weight of conflict hanging over us. The bracelet, once a symbol of unity, had become a source of division. In reflecting on the entire experience, I learned that family dynamics can be incredibly complicated. While traditions are important, they must be balanced with understanding and empathy for new members. I wanted my future DIL to feel embraced, but I also needed her to recognize the significance of the traditions that bind us together. I didn't want to hold on to anger or resentment. I just wanted us to find a way to feel like a family again. As the wedding day finally approached, I hoped that we could put our differences aside for the sake of love and celebration. I wanted to move forward and embrace her as part of our family, but I also knew that this would take time and patience. I had learned that healing often involves difficult conversations and vulnerability, and I was willing to invest in that process for the sake of my son and our future family. Thanks for reading my story. I hope it resonates with those of you who have faced similar challenges in your families. Navigating relationships can be messy, but I believe that with love and understanding, we can find our way through even the toughest of situations. Your thoughts and advice would mean a lot to me as we try to find a way forward together. I want to share something incredibly difficult that happened between my boyfriend and me, and I'm looking for advice on how to handle the aftermath. My partner, 20M, recently lost a vital family member in a horrific accident. It was an awful time for him, and I tried my best to support him and his family during this tough period. I took time off work to help, cooking, cleaning, and being there for him as much as possible. About 2 weeks after the tragedy, I was at his place, sitting in his bedroom, when he left the room for a moment. Suddenly, I heard a creak at the door, and to my absolute horror, I saw a shotgun being pointed through the opening. I didn't see his face at that moment. All I could focus on was the gun. Just for context, my partner knows how uncomfortable guns make me. I've made it clear throughout our 4 years together that I don't like to see them, hear about them, or have them in my space. Back to the incident. When he came into the room, he was holding the shotgun he had recently inherited from the family member who passed away. He had asked me earlier if I wanted to see it, but I had declined. I was in shock and confused about why he would bring this gun into his room, especially knowing my feelings about firearms. Then, in a moment that felt like it lasted an eternity, he cocked the shotgun and pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, echoing in the small space, and the bullet went straight through the wall. I was sitting about 4 feet away on the bed, and the noise was deafening. My eardrums felt like they had exploded, and all I could smell was gunpowder. I instinctively curled up in a ball, overwhelmed with fear, and I think I was crying and screaming. After what felt like an eternity, he came to his senses, profusely apologizing and saying he had no idea the gun was loaded and that he had never handled a shotgun before. In that moment, I couldn't process what was happening. I ended up having nightmares about the incident in the days that followed. Loud noises began to set me off, and I felt increasingly anxious. We didn't have a thorough conversation about it immediately afterward. I felt like I couldn't bring it up again, considering how freshly he had lost someone. But about a week later, I did ask him why he had brought the gun into the room, and he admitted he didn't know and wasn't thinking straight. That response left me feeling scared. He apologized again, saying he didn't deserve me and that he truly didn't know it was loaded. He promised it would never happen again. and that he learned from this experience. Now, I'm conflicted about what to do next. On one hand, our relationship has been good for the past 4 years. On the other hand, I'm not sure if I can shake this fear and anxiety. I've been contemplating whether we need some time apart. I also feel guilty for even considering that, especially since he is dealing with the recent loss of his family member. In a subsequent edit, I shared that he had unloaded the gun earlier in the week, but his dad reloaded it without his knowledge. This detail troubled me because it made me feel like he didn't take the situation seriously enough afterward. I've been struggling with this fear, especially since it was right after such a significant loss. I want to emphasize that he has since taken a gun safety class, which I hope makes a difference, but I'm still feeling uneasy. It's tough because we've been together for so long, and the idea of separating is incredibly daunting. I would appreciate any advice or insights from others who may have faced similar situations. How can I navigate this fear while still supporting him as he goes through his grieving process? What steps should I take for my own mental health in the aftermath of this incident? I'm eager to hear your thoughts and suggestions.
Boundaries and forgiveness. A family's journey through conflict and healing. When my sister moved in with me, I knew we were in for some changes, but I wasn't fully prepared for the emotional weight it would bring. My sister had been through a lot, recently left by her husband after years of marriage. She was left to fend for herself and her 19-year-old son in a world that felt unsteady, and as her health declined, I wanted to help. She and her son moved into my home, a temporary solution to give them stability. But soon, the cracks in our family's foundation started to show. From the start, I noticed a troubling dynamic between my sister and her son. She did everything for him, bending over backwards to make his life easier, and he barely seemed to notice. In fact, he acted entitled, demanding more from her without so much as a thank you. Even though she was the one who needed support, she constantly ended up being the caretaker, the one sacrificing herself for him. Watching her suffer was painful, but it wasn't my place to interfere, at least not until things reached a breaking point. The day everything changed was a day I'll never forget. I was upstairs working when I heard a noise downstairs that made me pause. My sister has hypoglycemia, and at times her blood sugar would drop without warning. She had mentioned having occasional blackouts and panic attacks, symptoms worsened by stress. This time, though, she was in real trouble. I ran downstairs to find her nearly collapsing, weak and disoriented. Her son, meanwhile, was sitting nearby, completely ignoring her. He saw her struggling, but he kept his eyes on his game, not even flinching. I couldn't believe it. I grabbed a piece of candy and got her stabilized, but I was boiling inside. In that moment, I couldn't hold back my frustration. I confronted her son, asking how he could ignore his own mother in such a vulnerable state. His response floored me. He shrugged, telling me that it was her fault she was so weak, and then he even began making sarcastic remarks. It wasn't just indifference, it was cruelty, a callousness I hadn't anticipated. I was shocked, hurt, and angry, feeling a rush of protectiveness over my sister that I hadn't felt in a long time. In that moment, I did what I felt was right. I told him to leave. As he walked out, I thought I was standing up for my sister, showing her that she didn't have to be mistreated under her own roof. However, it didn't take long for him to return, knocking on the door, asking to be let back in. My sister, to my surprise, felt bad for him, and allowed him to stay, her heart softening even after all he had done. Watching her waver was hard to understand. I struggled to reconcile my anger with her compassion. Should I have been more forgiving, or was I right to stand firm and demand respect in my home? The next few days were tense. I thought deeply about boundaries, about forgiveness, and about the delicate balance between protecting those we love and holding people accountable for their actions. It was a harsh reminder that family relationships are often more complicated than they appear. We often forgive because of love, but sometimes that love needs to be paired with limits. I wondered if there was a way to bridge the gap, to show him the importance of empathy and respect without driving a permanent wedge between us. In the end, I decided to have an honest conversation with him. We talked about what had happened, and I explained why his actions had hurt me so deeply. He was defensive at first, but gradually he seemed to understand. He apologized, although I could tell he was still struggling with his own frustrations and fears. It was a small step, but a necessary one. For now, he would stay, but with clear boundaries in place. Living together as a family isn't always easy. It requires patience, forgiveness, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. As I looked at my sister and her son, I knew that there would be more challenges ahead. But I also realized that every family has its struggles, its moments of hardship and healing. Sometimes we hurt the people we love the most, but with honesty and compassion, we can find a way forward. This experience taught me that while forgiveness is essential, it must be balanced with self-respect. Setting boundaries doesn't mean we don't care. It means we care enough to demand better. And while my sister's son may not have changed overnight, I remain hopeful that, in time, he'll come to appreciate the love and support he's been given. And in the meantime, I'll be here, trying to be the best brother I can be for both of them. The world of Reddit is like no other. It's a sprawling network of conversations, stories, and shared experiences where users reveal truths, seek advice, and dive into the deepest mysteries of the human experience. I never intended to become a part of this universe, but one day, curiosity led me down a rabbit hole that I never quite left. When I first joined, I didn't understand what Reddit was really about. I saw headlines in the news about viral stories and subreddits that seemed to have their own language. But when I actually signed up, I realized that it was so much more. Reddit isn't just a platform, it's a world within worlds where everyone from tech experts to horror aficionados, home cooks, and conspiracy theorists gather. It's a place where people feel comfortable sharing their triumphs and tragedies, their smallest grievances, and their biggest revelations. It's a collection of human stories in all their messy, beautiful, sometimes painful forms. At first, I only lurked, observing the ebb and flow of discussions. There were subreddits for everything: personal finance, unsolved mysteries, confessionals, and advice columns where people poured their hearts out to strangers, seeking answers to questions they didn't dare ask in their own lives. The anonymity of Reddit gives people a sense of freedom they don't have elsewhere. Behind a username, you're free to be your truest, rawest self. In those early days, Reddit was just a source of entertainment for me. I'd scroll through memes, watch funny videos, or read absurdly dramatic stories in subreddits dedicated to personal tales. But slowly, I started engaging more deeply. I would read someone's account of a personal crisis, and I could feel their pain and confusion. I realized that many people on Reddit were looking for genuine human connection, advice, and understanding. They weren't just there to pass the time, they were there to share and to be heard. One post stands out to me, marking the shift in how I saw Reddit. Someone had shared their story of loss a parent they'd recently lost to illness, and they described how that parent was their rock, the one person they could always rely on. The post was long, raw, and heartbreakingly beautiful. Thousands of strangers replied, sharing similar experiences, words of comfort, and heartfelt condolences. It felt like this entire community had gathered to hold this person up, each adding a small bit of strength to help them through their grief. I was moved by how open and empathetic people could be to someone they'd never met. In that moment, Reddit stopped being just a website to me. It became a community. My own story unfolded in ways I hadn't anticipated. I began sharing bits and pieces of my own experiences, asking questions I didn't feel comfortable asking friends or family, and engaging in conversations that felt deeply meaningful. The support was immediate. People responded with empathy, sometimes advice, sometimes just a me too that made me feel less alone. I found friends and connections in unexpected places, from strangers who knew nothing about me but still cared enough to offer genuine, thoughtful responses. Reddit also exposed me to perspectives I had never considered. Reading about people's experiences with issues like mental health, addiction, and family struggles expanded my understanding of the world. It taught me that everyone is dealing with their own battles, often silently. I was humbled by stories of resilience and strength, and even though I was just a spectator in most of them, they influenced me profoundly. One night, feeling a mix of bravery and curiosity, I posted a story from my own life. I shared a personal experience that I hadn't talked about openly before. I was nervous, worried that my vulnerability might be met with criticism or ridicule. Instead, the responses were overwhelmingly supportive. People shared similar stories, offered advice, or simply thanked me for sharing. It was one of the most validating experiences I'd had, and it taught me the power of storytelling. Through this interaction, I realized that by sharing my story, I was helping others feel less alone, just as I had felt supported by the stories I'd read. As time went on, I became more deeply involved. Reddit became a safe space where I could express myself fully. There were times I encountered trolls and negativity, but those instances were few compared to the positivity I experienced. I learned how to navigate the platform, how to find the people who made me feel welcome, and how to avoid the traps that made others feel alienated. Reddit has helped me grow in ways I never anticipated. I've become more open-minded, empathetic, and resilient. I've realized that we're all part of something larger, a vast web of shared experiences and collective wisdom. Everyone has a story worth telling, and everyone has something to learn. Reddit, in all its chaotic beauty, is a reminder that even in the most unexpected places, we can find connection, understanding, and even love. This is my journey through Reddit, a journey of discovery, connection, and transformation. I never expected an online community to impact me so deeply, but here I am, sharing my story with you. Devastated and spiraling. I am 35. Found a condom wrapper in my wife's 34 Farads car. Now what? The weight of the empty condom wrapper felt impossibly heavy in my hand, like a shard of glass lodged deep in my chest. The realization hit me like a tidal wave, crashing through my thoughts and leaving me breathless and stunned. It was just another day, a routine car wash, something I did frequently to help out, a small gesture of care. But as my hand swept beneath the passenger seat, that small, innocuous piece of plastic shifted my world on its axis. My wife, Julia, and I had been together for a decade. We'd started as close friends, confidants who shared everything from silly banter to deep fears. I'd always considered our relationship not only solid, but almost unbreakable. We were, in many ways, the couple everyone envied. Strong, loyal, and happy. She was beautiful, absolutely stunning, and I often felt I'd gotten way luckier than I deserved. In some moments, insecurity gnawed at me, a soft whisper that maybe I wasn't good enough for her, but I'd always brushed it aside. We loved each other, I reminded myself. We'd built a life, a home, and a vision of the future. Plans to start a family were unfolding right before us, and I couldn't wait to step into that new chapter together. But now, with this discovery, I was paralyzed with doubt. The single wrapper, a piece of evidence so starkly out of place in our lives, was like a Pandora's box, and my mind filled with questions and dark imaginings. My logical side urged me not to jump to conclusions. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe it was old. Maybe she had given a friend a ride. Maybe it had been dropped by accident. But even as I cycled through these rationalizations, the gnawing fear remained. It was then that a whirlwind of memories surged back, small moments I'd previously overlooked. The long hours Julia spent at the gym, her newfound dedication to her physical health, the way she sometimes seemed preoccupied when we were together. I had always supported her goals, proud of her commitment, her strength, her beauty. I tried to remind myself that these changes were just her pursuing a healthy lifestyle, something we'd both committed to over the years. But now, with this discovery, everything felt tainted. I couldn't bring myself to confront her yet. I spent the next few days wrapped in a fog of confusion and self-doubt. I was barely eating, barely sleeping. Every moment with Julia felt surreal, as if we were just going through the motions. She noticed, of course, and asked if something was wrong, but I brushed it off, claiming stress from work or poor sleep. How could I tell her that I was questioning everything? I wanted to believe in her, in us. But that tiny voice of suspicion grew louder each day, a gnawing presence that whispered words I couldn't ignore. On the fourth day, I realized I couldn't go on like this. I had two choices: confront her directly or carry this secret suspicion in silence, eroding whatever remained of our relationship from within. I took a deep breath, rehearsing what I might say, how I'd approach it. My heart pounded as I waited for her to come home that evening. As soon as she walked in, I felt the air shift. I could see the curiosity in her eyes, a hint of worry as she looked at me. She must have sensed something was wrong, but nothing could have prepared either of us for the conversation that was about to unfold. I swallowed hard, looking her in the eyes, and began to speak. "Julia," I said softly, my voice catching, "I need to talk to you about something. I need you to be completely honest with me." She looked taken aback, a flicker of concern crossing her face. "Of course, what is it?" I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "The other day, when I was cleaning out your car, I found something." I could barely get the words out, my voice trembling. "I found an empty condom wrapper under the passenger seat." Her expression changed in an instant, shifting from confusion to shock. For a long moment, she was silent, her face a mixture of disbelief and horror. She stammered, her gaze darting away. I, I don't know how. I don't know what to say." Her words were like a dagger to my heart, deepening the sense of betrayal. "Please, just be honest with me. Whatever it is, I deserve to know the truth." Tears filled her eyes as she struggled to speak. "I swear, I don't know where it came from. I would never, I mean, I would never betray you. You're my world." But her words felt hollow, and a part of me could no longer believe them. How could she explain away something so blatant, so incriminating? I was devastated, feeling as though the life we'd built together was slipping away. We sat in silence, the weight of our emotions pressing down on us. This wasn't how I'd envisioned our lives, our future. And yet, here we were, standing on the edge of something I never imagined we'd face. In the days that followed, we tried to talk, tried to understand, but a sense of unease lingered between us. I wanted to believe in her innocence, to believe that there was some explanation that would make sense of this nightmare. But trust, once broken, is a fragile thing, and I didn't know if we could ever go back to the way things were. Through the pain and confusion, I realized that I had to make a choice. I could let this suspicion consume me, destroying the love we once had, or I could take a leap of faith and trust her. It was a decision that weighed heavily on me, but in the end, I chose to believe her. Because sometimes love is about holding on, even when every instinct tells you to let go. Our journey was far from over, and I knew that rebuilding our relationship would be a challenge. But as we faced this trial together, I held on to the hope that love could prevail, that the trust we once shared could be restored. And though the road ahead was uncertain, I was willing to walk it with her, one step at a time, believing that the strength of our love could carry us through.